From the national headquarters of RT America in our nation's capital, hello again, everybody. I'm Rick Sanchez, and here we go again. Tonight, there is trouble brewing between the United States and Russia on the question of Venezuela. President Trump, with the support of Republican lawmakers, is sending signals that the United States will interfere in Venezuela's internal politics, and they're talking about doing something like this brazenly, publicly. The Trump administration, who has said that they are considering military options in Venezuela, is actually signaling this week that even though Nicolas Maduro was sworn in already as the president of Venezuela, we are not going to recognize him. We will recognize his opposition instead. That's what our government is saying. Now, regardless of what you may think of Venezuela and its very left-leaning politics, and trust me, there's plenty to question there, we still have to ask ourselves if it's the U.S.'s place to go around the world choosing another country's president, right? After all, isn't that what the United States media spends the majority of its time talking about these days? Whether Russia stuck its nose in our politics here in the United States? Here's Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov sending Washington today what appears to be almost a warning.
This is all very alarming and shows that in the United States, the policy of destabilizing countries in Latin America and in other regions remains one of its main priorities.
So Russia appears to be using the U.S.'s threats in Venezuela as leverage somehow, right? That's what it seems like, right? Why, you might ask? And why don't they just stay in their own corner of the world? And what business do the Russians have sticking their nose in Latin America, which is much closer to the U.S. border than it is to any borders in Asia, right? That's a good question. But you see, the Russians would argue that they could ask the same questions of us. Let me give you a little bit of a Russian perspective on this, something you would probably not get or consider. For hundreds and hundreds of years, Russians have tried minding their own business and have always ended up being fooled, invaded, and or lied to. So much so that people who study the Russian culture will tell you that it's almost like it's like baked into their psyche, right? Almost a little defensive about it now. The most recent example for this is the question of NATO. The Russians have not been allowed to join NATO, even though they've asked. Vladimir Putin himself has gone to NATO and says, please let us be a part of the organization. And they've said, no, you're not allowed. While NATO has encroached right up against the Russian border, despite being promised by the United States that that would never happen. Not going to happen, we said. That promise actually took place. I can give you the exact date. It took place on February 9th of 1990. So the Bush administration tells Mikhail Gorbachev on that day that in exchange for cooperation on, reunifying Germany, remember the wall and the whole thing? The U.S. would give its, this is a direct quote, ironclad guarantee that NATO will not expand 1 inch eastward past Germany. That's what they said, not 1 inch. Those are, again, that's a direct quote from the documents that were looked at, signed, the conversations that took place. So what happened after that? Come with me. I want to go to the wall and I want to show you something so you can kind of understand how this all works. NATO, at the U.S.'s urging, not only did they expand, they've taken it right to the Russian border. Let me show you something. All right, let's go in on this and okay, so all this red here is obviously Russia. There is Estonia and Latvia. Everything you see in green here is NATO, right? So here's Estonia and Latvia right up against the Russian border, right? Look, it's as if Iran or China or Russia itself had troops right on our border with Mexico. Now that would be a national emergency. And now NATO is actually making, here, come back here, I want to show you something. NATO is actually making overtures now with Ukraine. So they're knocking on the door with Ukraine, asking them if they want to also be included with NATO. And look what happens there. Look at this border. There's Russia. I mean, talk about, might Russia feel a little bit surrounded? Wouldn't you? Might they be asking giving the United States a taste of their own medicine with Mr. Lavrov's comments about the U.S. interference in Venezuela. Is that what's really going on here? We ask. It's no doubt a question that is worth asking. This is The News with Rick Sanchez, where we try to ask the questions that might sometimes give you a different perspective, one maybe you've never considered, because we really do believe it's time to do real news again.
Hey YouTube, thanks for checking out our channel. We hope you enjoyed the video. We have tons of content for you just like this. For more of RT America's one-of-a-kind news and analysis, be sure to subscribe and never stop questioning more.